Welcome to The Drive with your automotive experts and hosts, Lauren Fix and Karl Brauer. Each week we deliver the latest breaking news, vehicle reviews, and inside look at what's happening in the automotive world. Buckle up, it's time to hit the road with The Drive.
Welcome to The Drive with Lauren and Karl. I am your host, Karl Brauer, along with my lovely co-host, Lauren Fix. Lauren, how are we doing today?
I am good. There's a lot going on in the automotive world, and today we're going to be giving you some cool product, some cool vehicles, and some cool information that you definitely need to know, especially if you love your vehicle.
Yeah, we've got some great interviews coming up for this episode, and some unique individuals and some pretty powerful individuals in terms of their roles in the automotive industry. But let's start, before we get to any of that, with something that I think a lot of our viewers and listeners will care about, and that is their ability to enjoy their vehicles without having excessive restrictions. Right. And there's apparently some threat to that, at least in one state. And we all know how once one state starts going draconian, it tends to be like a virus and infects other states. But you've got a real, in-depth story on this and video. Lauren, tell us about what you discovered as far as an impending law in Minnesota, the state of Minnesota.
And I will also tell you as we get started that anytime you want to see anything that we've done or you missed part of the show, go to the Drive Car Show on YouTube. You'll see video of all the things we're describing and discussing and the interviews, and you'll get to see it rather than just listen to it. All right, we're going to discuss Minnesota's law, HF 3865. Now, it was originally designed as for collector cars. You've got a Model T, or you got an old Mustang, and maybe you just take it out every once in a while. You can get special plates. And you just have to register it with collector car insurance. That's all you needed. It was pretty simple. It was addressed as pretty simple. But then the Antique Automobile Club of America, known as the AACA, and I'm a lifetime member, they started addressing this situation. They found they were rewriting the law. Why would you rewrite a simple law? Well, they claim that the reason they're rewriting this law is because people were taking advantage of it. They were getting collector car insurance on their Camaro or their Mustang or their Porsche or whatever, and they were driving it every single day. We don't see a lot of cases in that, and how many people are actually doing that? But the new law, the way it's rewritten, this is what Karl's talking about. They want to restrict it so you can only drive your car on weekends, Saturday and Sunday only, and only during certain times of the weekday if you're going to a charitable event or a car-specific event. So where's your freedom there, Karl?
Yeah, so they're essentially greatly inhibiting what you can do with the car. You can only drive it on the weekends. You can't drive it during the week, and you have to be driving it for a specific purpose. Right. So, as is often the case, it's like, what's the percentage, if anyone, that was abusing the system? And the government reaction to it is, well, we're just going to throw this incredibly controlling, draconian new set of rules in so that nobody cheats.
Right. And you get a ticket. I mean, a police officer gets to make that determination. Now, if you're speeding, you're going to get a ticket, right?
Right.
But if you're driving your car and you're going for ice cream because you go, hey, Karl, let's just go for a cruise. I just put some new brake pads on my car. I need to bed the brake pads in. And you go, yeah. Or we'll go for a cruise. Now
it's a warm summer. It's a warm summer, Tuesday evening in July, and it's and you want to go to the ice cream with your daughter or your spouse or your best friend in the car that you've been restoring all summer, and it's running great, and then you get pulled over by the police, and they're like, hey, you can't be driving this to get ice cream on a Tuesday night. It seems ridiculous.
It's not a car event, and there are cars and coffee events, and there are charitable events, and so this is a problem. So there's two options in this case: do nothing, and the law will change. And it will affect everybody, or get involved, speak to your elected legislator and say, hey, we don't want this. We didn't ask you to change this law. Or choice 3 is you can go back to get regular plates and you pay a higher registration fee. But it starts in Minnesota and you're in California. And we'll be talking a little bit about what Leno is doing there. But I'm in New York, and we know that when one state does it, the others will follow.
Yes. All right. Well, that was an interesting topic. We're going to come right back with more on The Drive with Lauren and Karl. Got a great interview coming up.
Welcome back to The Drive with Lauren and Karl. This segment is brought to you by Classic Tube. Prevent tubing products when precision matters. Professionals trust Classic Tube. Brake lines, fuel lines, transmission lines for collector cars or your daily driver. Classic Tube is the exact fit, trusted quality, and made in the USA. Now, Karl, we have a really exciting guest And I think what people don't think about is they go to get their oil change and they don't even think about what it is. But we have some information that you really need to know, especially if you want to keep your car for a long time.
Yeah, and people are keeping their cars for a longer time because the
Yeah.
challenges they're facing and everything from economic to just feeling like maybe they're not as big of fans of the newer cars and they like the older models and they want to keep them going.
Yeah.
So we are lucky to have Valvoline's Senior Global Research and Development Director, Dr. Warholic, with us to talk about engine oil and how vital it can be to maintaining your vehicle and trying to keep those costs down and that engine going for as long as possible. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the show, Dr. Warholic.
Hello, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us
Absolutely.
about the various types of engine oils. I think when you go to get your oil change, people are confused. They're like, I don't know, I got an oil change. But that's like saying you just bought a sandwich. Well, what kind of sandwich? So can you tell us the different kinds of oils and what consumers need to know?
Absolutely, yeah. And when I first joined Valvoline and got in this business, I said the same thing. Oil's oil, right? Well,
Yeah.
Valvoline's been doing it for 160 years, and I found out that oil is not oil. Every oil is actually different. And it serves incredibly important aspects in the engine, right? It cleans the engine, it removes heat, it provides obviously a lubricant for efficiency, and so it can do many things. And I could go on and on about what oil does in an engine, and then Valvoline has taken those attributes. And we've talked to consumers. We have a great marketing department and strategy department that ask consumers what they want, DIYers, professionals. Hey, what's important to you? Longevity, you guys mentioned cars are getting older. Some folks want a cleaner engine. Some want wear protection. And so our portfolio is mapped to what consumers want. And over the years, it's obviously evolved. We were the first high mileage oil, right? So we developed that 25 years ago, actually, right? So Valvoline broke the mold there and said, hey, people are looking for protection in older engines. And then more recently with Restore and Protect, we really changed the game with a product that actually reverses time. It actually removes deposits, and we showed that at our engine lab in Ashland. So again, our portfolio fits everybody's needs.
That's interesting because when you go to get an oil changer, it's like, well, what do you want? And it's like, I don't know, whatever's cheap. But I think you get what you pay for, and that's probably true literally in everything from tires to oil. But you got your regular oil, your blends, and your full synthetics, and there truly is a difference. And although it may cost a little bit more, it used to be a lot more, now it's just a little bit more. The results, what you're getting, especially with a Valvoline product, is pretty dramatic.
It really is. I mean, when you talk about the different conventional synthetic blend, full synthetic, you're talking about the base oils that make up the bulk of what's in that bottle that you're buying. And the attributes of those base oils is what drives performance. As you move up from a conventional to a full synthetic, you get better thermal protection. You get better low temperature protection. So when you start your car in the morning, the oil has to flow properly. When it's hot, so when it's around, say, 200, 250 Fahrenheit in your engine on average, it has to withstand that heat and not break down and thicken and wear out quickly. And up by the piston, where a lot of the action is happening, where your combustion's happening, temperatures get north of 600 Fahrenheit. And so if your oil can't withstand that heat, it'll break down very quickly and generate a lot of deposits. You can get stuck rings, which we now can talk about in terms of our Restore and Protect product. We've been able to show that product actually unsticks rings.
Wow.
We ran two engines, 500,000 miles, two Ford Explorers, and we found some stuck rings at the end of that in a conventional oil. And somebody asked the question, hey, what if we put Restore and Protect in there? Do you think we'd unstick the rings? And so we went in the lab at our engine lab in Ashland, Kentucky, and did exactly that. And we're able to show that Restore and Protect actually unsticks stuck rings in a piston, which is a game changer from an engine oil perspective.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing. Can you give us just maybe a little more detail on what were the characteristics that you engineered into Restore and Protect that gives it this kind of fountain of youth, reverse time capability?
Well, I can't give you the magic formula as much as
Of course, it's like the KFC formula. I know, but
exactly. Yes, I'm in Kentucky, so that's apt, right? But I can tell you that it's years and years of formulating experience, but also lots of data generation. It didn't happen overnight. This journey actually started back in 2018, and there are actually a very specific componentry in the product that does what it does, and it's a combination of actually multiple components. Detergents, antioxidants, detergents that actually do what it does. And you have to find the right box, the right window to fit into in terms of performance, because there's actually offsets in terms of, hey, you want better cleanliness. Well, that may impact other things. So you have to balance it and then generate the data. Go into the engine and run that engine 200,000 miles, 300,000 miles. And we lean heavily into that. And ultimately, we found a combination of components that I said, aha, that's interesting. Look, we actually removed deposits. Usually we're trying to prevent deposits, but we were actually able to reverse it and find the right formulation combination to do that.
That's actually quite interesting. So if I've got an older car and I do my own oil changes, I can obviously buy, restore, and protect from Valvoline in my local store. What if I go to an oil change place? Can you ask for that? Because not everyone knows how to change your oil.
Yeah, it's widely distributed. The product has been in the market for 2.5, almost 3 years now, right? So hopefully most people know Restore and Protect by name at your local garage. You can ask for it, and obviously you can buy it at retail outlets around the country. But we have different viscosity grades. We have 020, 520, 530, and we also have a new 0W16 product. As you know, oils are getting thinner and thinner for fuel economy, and so we have to account for that. And then our product also meets the new GF7 specification, which is a new light-duty engine oil specification for most vehicles on the road.
Wow. Well, this is great stuff, Dr. Workaholic. Thank you for coming on and talking to us about not just oil in general, but some of the specifics that you can benefit from if you buy the right kind of oil. And obviously the Restore and Protect seems to have a pretty unique offering in the marketplace there. We really appreciate your time. We would love to have you on again, and we know you've got a great facility there in Kentucky. Maybe Lauren and I will come out sometime and tour it. But thank you for your time today. Yeah, we should go out there, Lauren. Thank you for your time today, Dr. Warholic. We'd like to have you on again, and you have a great day. Thanks for coming on the drive with Lauren and Karl.
Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
Welcome back to The Drive with Lauren and Karl, and this segment is brought to you by IC Cars. That's where I'm the executive analyst, and that's where you can find everything from local and national listings, new and used cars that you can filter on everything, mileage, price, location, fuel efficiency, anything you're looking to filter your used car shopping on. And you can also read a lot of the great analysis we do on everything from which cars last the longest to which brands or models hold their value the best to which car color will give you the best resale value down the road. We do everything. So that's iccars.com. Check us out.
And we'll be talking more about that too. And if you stay with us to the end of the show, we're going to talk about recalls. So you want to stay for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of recall data that we've been looking at recently, and it's pretty telling.
Yeah.
But for this next segment, we're going to talk about Jay Leno and what's been known as Leno's Law. And if you are a California resident or even just a fan of vintage vehicles anywhere in the country, this is a very interesting law. Now, I grew up in Golden, Colorado, so right outside Denver, and they had a rule that as cars got to a certain age, you didn't have to play the emissions game anymore with them. And it was fabulous. And it was a rolling thing. And I think it was like 30 plus years, but it was a rolling time frame. And so I didn't have to deal with, I did have to deal with emissions test on my 69 and 70 Plymouth GTXs, but eventually I did not have to. Well, I've got to deal with emissions testing on my daughter's 1988 Pontiac Firebird Formula 350, and it is a real pain. And we take it in, and what happens is it doesn't pass, or it just barely doesn't pass. And I asked the guy, it's like, when I had it, we've had this thing for like 5 years now, and it wasn't a problem when we first got it. And he said they've tightened the standards. He said they have now tightened the standards in the state of California for these old vintage cars that essentially they could pass when they were brand new. But cars age, everything from the ignition system to deposits in the cylinder, the piston, and inside the combustion chamber, as we heard just on our last segment and all. No car runs as clean. Cars don't get running cleaner as they get older. They run a little dirtier as the fuel system is less precise.
Unless you get that Restore and Protect.
But if you have Valvoline, maybe you can reverse that. Maybe we'll try that in my daughter's car. So I have to play all these games every other year. Every 2 years, you got an emissions test. Every 1976 and newer car in the state of California, which is ridiculous because how many 1988 cars are on the road in California? Hardly any, right? So the total emissions contribution to the state's pollution from like 1988 and earlier cars is probably not measurable. And yet they have to play this game every 2 years. So the Leno's Law, which has been now on its second run through, they already had it go through once, it didn't make it, but I was shocked because usually once something misses in a government effort,
It's
and a
done
legislative effort.
usually.
You don't
Yeah.
see it, yeah, ever again, or maybe like 5 years and later. And this was like less than a year ago, this thing died, and now it's back again. And it's got some tweaks that are supposed to address issues that apparently some of the lawmakers didn't like. But the bottom line is that they would create a system where there would be a rolling exemption as our timeline moves forward. Cars that are older past a certain age don't have to get emissions tested because the assumption is there's not that many of them around. And what I just said, it's harder for them to pass the emissions as they get older. And it's not a big deal if they don't pass emissions because there's not that many of them on the road.
Right.
Right, Lauren?
Right. But it's true. And that's Senate Bill 1392, if you want to look it up. Because again, like Karl said in our first segment, like Minnesota, you watch to see what California is doing. It has a lot of power over 17 states. So what California does typically, you would see in states like Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. They typically Colorado, they follow. You've got the ones that push back, like Texas, where they don't have state inspection anymore because they found that it was just too cumbersome to produce stickers and the costs and everything. So some states have different rules. Now, I'm not saying to move, but you do need to be aware when you have someone like Jay Leno with his power. He's a legendary car collector, to go in with someone from each side of the aisle to say, we need to do something. And these are constituents that vote. I mean, Karl's one of them. You've got a car in that situation because what they did is underneath the dash in 1996 in newer cars, there's this onboard diagnostic check. And they can plug in and find out if your car's got check engine lights or there's a problem with the vehicle or it's not passing emissions.
If it's been modified.
Right.
Right.
But that's for newer cars. What about older cars? So anything that's around the 1980s, that didn't exist. And I've got cars from the 60s. What do you do if you got an older car? How are you supposed to test? They used to put a sniffer up the tailpipe. I don't even think they're doing that anymore, Karl.
No, they aren't on modern cars. And so I got a quick story for you is I had a 2005 Ford GT. I put 31,000 miles on it. I sold it to Doug DeMuro. Now he's got it. And when I had it, I had put on what was called stage 1 upgrades, a smaller pulley and to give it more boost, and then an ECU reflash to take advantage of
We
the
did
boost.
that too on ours, yeah.
And it really made the car notably quicker, but it still passed emissions. That was the whole point. The whole point was if you put the thing up the exhaust pipe, a lot of emissions that the 2005 and 2006 Ford GT was allowed to output to pass the California limits still was within those limits with this modification. But now, since I've sold it to Doug, he has to deal again every 2 years. He has to get it emissions tested. And they no longer, like you said, Lauren, even check the exhaust. Now what they do is they plug into the OBD2 sensor and they check. And if it's been modded at all, you're in trouble. In other words, the car's not emitting any more pollutants than it was allowed to when it was new by the state of California's rules. But it's not the same as when it was stock. It's been modified. Not to make more pollution, just to make more horsepower. Pollution's the same. You get in trouble and you have to get it back to stock. So every 2 years, he has to deal with that.
And a lot of those garages can't even test anymore. And again, this is a problem across the entire country. So no matter where you're listening to us and you think, oh, that's just California. No, it could become a federal law depending upon who's in office too. So you really need to watch these rules and you need to push back and tell people no matter what state you're in, don't take away my freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous to think that you have all these older cars that either are hardly on the road, or you have newer cars like only a 20-year-old Ford GT, and it's passing the emissions standards. But it's been modified, so you're in trouble. It's like, I've modified it in a way that doesn't emit more pollutions. Well, you still changed it. So it's not a good system, and it's a very reflective example of California's kind of draconian effort on cars, which is crazy because it is the car capital of the world, and you'd think they'd want to make it friendly for car owners out here, not unfriendly. Right. But you could say the same thing about a bunch of aspects of California. So we're going to be right back after this quick break, and we're going to be talking to another kind of high-powered individual in the automotive industry, this on the two-wheeled side. So we'll be right back with more on The Drive with Lauren and Karl. Welcome back to The Drive with Lauren and Karl, and we have a very special guest on for this segment. It is Jason Chinnick from Ducati. He's actually the CEO of Ducati North America, so kind of an important individual in the world of two-wheeled vehicles. And Jason, you and I have been on multiple press trips. I've gotten to spend quality time sitting next to you at a great meal talking about your history, and I love the fact that both of us have a point in time or an experience with BMW Fort Collins and Ducati store
Yep.
where I
Yep.
got my first Ducati, and you worked
Yep.
early in your career. So, and both of us are natives, right? You're a native of Denver, and I am too, or Colorado Front Range.
Yeah, the Colorado Front Range. Yeah, and it's actually a lot of fun to know that we have that connection in the past and our paths crossed, but in different lives. So
Yeah, yeah. It took a while for us to cross again, but we were both back there at some point in time. And of course, I know you've had press events, a recent one in Colorado, and it's just such a great place to ride motorcycles too. You get very spoiled up there because you have such great scenery and places to ride. But I think what I would most want to make sure people understand about you is your level of passion. You know, you think of a CEO of any kind of large corporation, particularly an automotive or a motorcycle corporation, and you don't necessarily think that they are very hands-on or maybe not even super passionate about the product. You hope they are. You want to think they are, but I think a lot of times you maybe question whether they are. Please tell us some of your recent product involvement in the expanded racing that Ducati is doing, the fact that they're at their 100-year celebration, and what you specifically did with a motorcycle as part of all of this.
it's a great question, and I think that to your point, being a motorcyclist first, and actually in the motorcycling industry, it's, in my opinion, required for you to be an enthusiast and ideally a rider as well. I mean, people can be passionate and enjoy motorcycling, but riding, in order to be able to connect with our clients and understand the things that motivate them and they experience. So for me, starting from my humble beginnings as a parts guy behind a counter at a motorcycle dealership in Colorado, I've been able to successfully manage taking that passion and just refining and honing my professionalism, if you will, through my career. But I had a clear goal in mind of what I wanted to do when I got into the world of motorcycling for a career. And
Mhm.
and I was also very paramount in helping to steer Ducati's our path towards the off-road world.
Mhm.
And mainly that comes a little bit from my own passion as well, because as most American motorcyclists, we get our first experience riding a motorcycle in the dirt. It's
Yeah.
usually off-road, that's our experience. It's very different than Europe, where a lot of people have scooters or there's other means of transportation where two-wheeled vehicles are looked at that as opposed to us. We're not transportation, we're entertainment. We're what people are going to
Right.
do with their discretionary
Yeah, we're a
spending.
tiny niche, right?
Exactly. And it's something that's, if you don't have that passion, then you're just chasing numbers. And I think then you lose the connection of what inspires and motivates people to ride in the first place.
Mhm.
But knowing that, I'm always looking to expand the Ducati brand. So it didn't just come from a matter of my own enthusiasm for off-road riding from my youth, but also how do we grow the Ducati brand yet stay true to our core values of style,
Mhm.
sophistication, performance. And we're
Mhm.
very competitive as a brand, as you know, in MotoGP and World Superbike. So for us to enter the world of off-road was really a natural place for us to go. And so we've entered this last year into the Supercross racing, and actually we'll be at the outdoor motocross races as well with Troy Lee and Red Bull and a couple great riders. Actually, we've been staying within the top 10, and which is amazing for the first year ever coming into the World Supercross. That I've had people tell me that that should not be underestimated.
Right.
Most people don't expect us to finish in the top 10, let alone being consistent. So that's been a really important piece of how our strategy in growing the brand, but also my own enthusiasm. And as to your point, the 100th anniversary that you mentioned, this year I was looking for a way for me to connect with our past. I've had vintage bikes in the past. I love Ducati's history. And what could I do in order to connect, let's say, the past, and which is the year for us to look back to what we do today? And I did a bunch of homework, and I've always heard about this bike, the Ducati 450 RT Desmo. That was one of the first motocross bikes built for the North American market in mind in 1971. And I did some research, found old articles, and decided to get my hand not only on one, but two, because when you're rebuilding a bike, you need to have spares. And that's the best way to do it, is to get two.
You've
Uh,
been down that road before, clearly.
yes, yes, sadly. And then you also find out between the two what was the real bike supposed to be, because bikes have been modified so much over the last 50 some odd years. So I took on a project of making a resto mod. It started off with the idea of just restoring it. And then I'm like, well, why do that? I have improved suspension, improved technology these days in order to make the bike better. So
Right.
why not have the classic soul and that motor and the frame and then modernize it? And then of
Right.
course, what am I going to do with it? So I entered this race in Southern California desert, in the Mojave Desert next week, actually this week, at the end of this week, called the Biltwell 100, which is a 100-mile race in the desert. And it's a fun race, meant to just kind of capture that enthusiasm behind what I'm learning
Wow.
to do.
100-mile race across the desert out in the middle of, no pavement involved on a 40, not almost
54.
50, yeah, 54-year-old motorcycle.
I know because I actually found that the manufacturing date is the same as my birthday. So it's
Oh,
as
that's too
old as I
perfect.
am. Yeah, it was cool because I got the VIN and I pulled the old
Wow.
label off and I even hand stamped the new label. And I'm like, it's the same month as myself. And so it was meant to
That's
happen.
awesome. Yeah,
And then
clearly.
yeah, and then the next day I'm going to race our modern cross country bike in the desert. So it's kind of fun connecting the historical piece of
Wow.
it to today.
So just to be clear, we're got a 100-year anniversary of Ducati, and my understanding is you guys are going to be launching more new bikes this year than in any single calendar year in the past.
Yes,
Which,
14 new
if
models this year. It's incredible.
in case we needed validation that the Ducati brand is healthy and vibrant, I think we just got it. But also, you're leading the North American Ducati brand as a traditional CEO would lead it, but you're also restoring old Ducatis yourself, like hands on. You're not paying a shop. You personally are doing it. And then you are personally racing the restored motorcycle that you have personally brought back to life,
Yep,
54-year-old.
I have be very transparent. I subbed the motor out to a guy who is like the expert
Okay.
because I don't have the time to go through
Right.
it. And honestly, the experience and skill, but from the motor, I've done all the assembly. I mean, I've late nights over the weekend. I've got the
Cranking
scars on my
bolts.
hands to prove it, that grinding wheel getting a little too close to the skin. So yes, but this is, and it's fun when you make that connection. Then you develop this weird emotional connection to this, inanimate object. It's this
Right.
machine that
That would never happen otherwise. It could never happen
no,
otherwise like that.
no. And having an objective in mind, like a goal of the race, is
Yeah.
really important as well because then it's funny, even all from paint to body and everything else I'm working with. When you work with a deadline, it's amazing
Yes.
how everything finally gets done. So
A little bit of motivation there. Well,
exactly.
this has been great, Jason. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us about not just your role at Ducati, but all the amazing things going on with the brand right now and your kind of above and beyond CEO role that you're doing there. We really appreciate it. We'll have to have you on again. I want to hear about how the racing went and other new things coming from Ducati because it sounds like this is going to be a busy year. But thank you for your time. We appreciate you, and we will be right back with more on The Drive with Lauren and Karl.
Thanks, Carl.
Welcome back to The Drive with Lauren and Karl, and this segment is brought to you by Karl Brauer Cars. That's my YouTube channel where I'm putting up one or two at least videos a week. Lots of cool stuff like the Gone in 60 Seconds Eleanor Mustang that I got to drive, even more powerful and better built than the movie cars, but by the same team. And also things like, I'll say, the Maserati GT2 Stradale. I'm probably messing that up. I can't say that quite as good as the Italians can, but we just drove that really unique version of the MC20. More powerful, lighter weight, very capable performance car in a blue, beautiful shade of blue Infinito.
Oh,
So check out Karl Brauer Cars on YouTube. Now, we're going to talk about a study that IC Cars recently released that relates to recall numbers. And, Lauren, recalls are things that nobody wants to deal with when they own a car. It's a major hassle. Typically involves an unscheduled dealer visit to address something. And of course, if a recall's been issued, it means that NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, has felt that there's something serious enough that all the cars that have a given component or a given issue need to go back to the dealer and have it addressed.
Right.
And so we looked at what is the recall rate for vehicles in recent years. I think we looked from 2017 to 2025.
That's a big
And
gap. Yeah.
yeah, that's a huge amount. And what we do is we've got, just like we can predict kind of the lifespan of cars by looking at massive amounts of data on massive millions and millions of cars to see when they come off the market and at what mileage. We can also see the pattern of recalls for different brands and different makes and different models. And so we did that. We studied all these millions of cars over this large period. And we not only recorded right from NHTSA's numbers, by the way, NHTSA, anyone can do this. We just are the ones taking the time and energy to do it. Looking at NHTSA's numbers told us which brands have had the most recalls, which cars have had the most recalls. And then we are able, within our secret sauce algorithm with our data team, to predict lifetime recall numbers for cars over a 30-year lifespan. So we can tell you what the
no one else is doing that.
Nobody's doing it.
I don't think there's any other website that does that.
No, nobody's doing it. Just like nobody's doing the lifespan stuff that we do too.
Right.
So now we know not only which cars have been recalled the most and which brands have had the most recalls, but which cars are most likely to have the most recalls over their 30-year lifespan. And it was very interesting because I think anyone who's been watching the news at all in the automotive industry probably has a sense of this, but Ford, on an order of magnitude, has more recalls than any other brand. I mean, they recalled, we looked at a 12-month period from April of 25 to March of 26, just like a month ago.
Right.
And what we found was that in that time frame, Ford had 19.5 million vehicles recalled.
Wow.
Now,
that's not a record, though. There's been others that have outdone that, but recently, I think it's a big one.
For perspective, in that same time frame, Toyota is number 2, 4.1 million versus 19.5, almost 5 times as many recalls from Toyota or from Ford in the last year than from Toyota.
That's a lot.
And now remember, if you're a high volume seller, the more cars you produce, the more likely you're going to have recalls that have higher units because you're producing millions and millions of cars. You know, like one of the least recalled brands was VinFast. Well, VinFast isn't producing a lot of cars.
How many cars have they sold in the U.S.? A couple dozen?
I was like, you know what? Given how many cars they sell, that's still a high number, whatever their number was. But you know, if you're a high volume seller, you're going to have more recalls than a low volume seller. But Toyota, by the way, I looked this up just to be sure. Toyota sold 2.5 million cars in the U.S. last year, and Ford sold 2.2. So Ford doesn't even sell more cars. They sell slightly less cars than Toyota, and they had 19.5 million recalls.
What's your thoughts on why Ford is in such a position? Because in the past, Ford didn't have those kind of recall numbers.
Remember when quality was job one, Lauren?
No. I can't. I have stories I can tell only off air.
Well, I think there's 2 elements, right? I think one is that Ford is in an agreement with NHTSA that relates to them being more closely watched for recalls. Basically, they're close. I think NHTSA's got some level of kind of visibility into Ford, which makes it so that Ford has to be extra diligent on doing recalls, more so than a lot of other automakers. So I think that's kind of forcing their hand. Now, why is that? Why? Yeah, they have to be more proactive. Now, why is that situation exists for Ford? Because they'd had so many recalls in the past that NHTSA basically, they're kind of on probation. NHTSA's like, we got to watch you closer because of your past history. And that's not a NHTSA relationship with Ford. That's a Ford problem. And remember, Mark Fields was essentially booted from the head role at Ford 10 years ago because they had too many recalls.
And they blamed him for something that he didn't actually do.
He was kind of the fall guy for that when it really wasn't his problem. And Farley comes in to address that specific issue. And here we are 9 years later, 19.5 million recalls.
But he just got a raise, so don't worry about him. He's got a $27 million raise, so he's totally fine. But let's look at other companies. I mean, even General Motors has had recalls for the ignition switches. Toyota's had the floor mats that got underneath the unintended acceleration. I mean, Volkswagen had Dieselgate. So they're not alone. It's not like, it's just Ford, all eyes on Ford. Every brand has had their time. Some legit, some are proactive. We've seen people say, you know what, there might be a problem. And then others, are problems that didn't actually occur. Like when Audi back in the 2000s, they were saying that the cars were unintended accelerated, and it wasn't even true. But it hurt the brand.
That was kind of the Toyota thing too. We obviously had the high profile case where the floor mat got jammed, but that was because someone used the wrong floor mat in that car and it screwed up the pedal and it got all jammed in there. There was never, ever any evidence that there was some weird phantom in the machine that caused acceleration on those Toyotas. Every case when they dug in, it was wrong pedal. Just like with Audi 30 years earlier in the 80s, it was kind of stupid.
Yep.
But some of the now people are like, well, everything's getting recalled. No, Mercedes-Benz. We looked at the predicted lifespan recalls, and Mercedes-Benz out of 25 cars, they had the first 9 positions. Positions 1 through 9 were all Mercedes-Benz vehicles in that 25 list, and they had like another 6 cars. They had like half of the list was Mercedes-Benz.
Wow.
So, some cars are really good. And the other thing you want to note is that, for instance, Tesla had all 4 of their models, not the Cybertruck, because I don't think that was in our thing because it's too new, but the Y3, X, and S were all in that data. We're all on the top 25 list of most recalled cars, unless you pulled out the OTA, known as over-the-air recalls. When you pulled those out, Tesla fell off. And an over-the-air recall usually happens at night when the car's parked in your garage and you're not even thinking about it. So there is no dealer visit. So recalls are recalls. That's a safety issue. So you'd still like to rather not have any recalls. But if you have a recall that can be done while you sleep at night and the car's in the garage, that's pretty good. And that reflects well, at least on Tesla being able to not have mechanical ones that require dealer visits. So it's an interesting study. You should go to IC Cars and check it out. Lots of studies there, but that one just came out recently. And you can, if you're looking for the least recalled cars, so you don't have to deal with the hassle, the study will have that list in there, both current and also predicted future. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with more on The Drive with Lauren and Karl.
Welcome back to The Drive with Lauren and Karl. This segment is brought to you by Car Coach Reports. That's my news channel. Looking for straight answers on cars? Car Coach Reports has you covered with automotive news, expert advice that you can trust. And check out my car review channel, Car Smarts. We're posting 3 times a week. That's my car review channel that covers all the newest in test vehicles, and we explain it and keep it pretty simple. Know before you buy on your next vehicle. That's Car Coach Reports or Car Smarts on YouTube. Now, Karl, we're seeing a huge influx of Chinese cars on a global basis, not here in North America, well, at least the US, it's in Mexico, and it's also in Canada now. 49,000 Chinese cars are going to be allowed in. But there's a big reckoning coming, and I don't think that the auto industry even saw this coming, but you and I did.
Yeah, I always feel like when anything's too good to be true, we know the rest of that statement. And the Chinese car industry has appeared to be exploding in every way, and they're just on fire, and nobody can keep up, and their cars are fabulous. And let me read the thing here. Automotive news story: Chinese car dealerships losing money jumped to 56% in 2025, up from 42% in 2024. New 5% EV tax has chilled sales, with January-February deliveries plunging 19% year over year. Only 23% of dealerships expect market expansion in 2026 amid rising pessimism. China's ongoing new car price war further undermined retailer financial results as vehicle sales fell in the world's biggest auto market. Intensifying competition forced 82% of dealerships to retail new cars at prices below wholesale, the group said. The race to undercut rivals pushed down average gross margin of new car sales across the dealerships to a negative 26% in 2025 from negative 18% a year earlier, according to the survey. The average gross margin from auto financing and insurance fell to 24% last year from 38% in 2024, after regulators required banks to tighten control of loans to ward off financial risks, the group noted. So you look at all these numbers and statistics, Lauren, and essentially what they're saying is there's too many cars, there's too much competition. To get them off the lots, they have to lower the prices to below what the dealers paid for them so that they're losing money. And sales are down, and profit margins, even in the related insurance and other industries, are falling too. So almost like there's some growing pains would probably be a kind way to describe what's going on in China. And I think you and I both have suspected for years that for the first time ever, China has maybe been a little duplicitous on how they've been running one of their industries and how healthy it's been versus a lot of government propping up. And this is the oldest trick in the book, Lauren. What do we have laws against monopolies in this country for? Because if you're a big company and you decide to stomp every other company out that tries to compete with you, you run at a loss. Yeah, you run at a loss, whether it takes 2 days or 2 months or 2 decades, but you run at a loss until you kill all the other competition because they can't run at a loss as fast as long as you can. And then you're back to being the only game in town. And the Chinese are doing this at a global level, Lauren. They are
Oh, yeah.
pricing their cars and pricing their components and subsidizing their auto industry. And then everyone's wondering why these Chinese cars that cost like $35,000 and they're better than a Mercedes. It's like, well, because they don't cost $35,000. They're priced at $35,000, and the structure has been set up with the government to make them appear to cost $35,000,
Correct.
but they don't.
Well, there's more to this. And Bernie Moreno, who's a senator out of Ohio, is now going to be putting in legislation to stop Chinese cars, Chinese car parts, which is actually good for us from a safety standpoint, and software from entering the U.S., protecting the U.S. car market. Now, you may say that's a dumb idea. It is not a dumb idea. They will come in, just like Karl said, they'll lowball the price on cars, parts, and software. And then we as consumers think we've got something. Just like everything else, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, it's almost like, again, if that price on that Chinese car and the equipment and you're getting and the features seem too good to be true. And there's still no question about long-term reliability too. We've talked about that before.
Nobody knows.
None of these cars have been tested for 10 years or more because they didn't exist 10 years ago. So, all right. Well,
what you buy, because what you buy, you're going to keep for a while.
Yeah, you want it to last a long time. That's why you want to look at longest lasting lists like we have at IC Cars versus buying cars you have no idea what they're going to do. Exactly. This has been a great episode. Thanks again for joining me, Lauren. I think we had a lot of fun this time, and we had a lot of great guests and a lot of great information. And we are looking forward to our next one. We will be right back in the next week with another great episode of The Drive with Lauren and Karl.
You've been listening to The Drive, your trusted source for the latest car news, expert reviews, and real insights into the automotive world. Thanks for riding along with us today. You can check out the entire archive of every episode on our YouTube channel, The Drive with Lauren and Karl. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and join the conversation by leaving your comments. We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay safe, enjoy the ride, and we'll see you right back here on The Drive.